Hi, it's Luke from the Leicester Property Blog, and I've got a surprising figure. Did you know that 167,000 people live in rented accommodation within Leicester? Now that figure surprised me, and with the general election out the way, I thought it was time to reflect upon renting in the manifestos and the party political broadcasts and ask why. As the best way to tell the future is to look at the past, so we decided to look at the number of people who have rented a century ago in the 1920s. And surprisingly, 76% of people rented their home in the UK, as renting was considered the norm. Yet in the latter part of the 1920s, builders of the suburban housing estates and their bay-fronted semis started to sell the dream of home ownership to smart renters. Up until the mid-1920s, the mortgage had been seen as a millstone around your neck. Now, due to some clever marketing by those same builders, it was started to be seen as a shrewd long-term investment to buy your own home with a mortgage. It fueled the ambitious goals of the up-and-coming well-to-do working class who reclassed themselves as lower middle class. Meanwhile, the government encouraged, through tax breaks, people to save in building societies, whom in turn lent money to these up-and-coming new homeowners through mortgages. Roll the clock forward to the decade of the young Elvis, Chuck Berry, Bill Haley, meaning the 1950s, and still 72% of British people rented their home. Home ownership had boomed, and in the preceding 30 years, yet so had council house building. Then, as we entered the 1960s and 1970s, home ownership started to grow at a higher rate than council housing. The rate of home ownership started to drop substantially after the mid-1990s, and now we roll the clock forward to today. There is no stigma at all to renting. Everyone is doing it. In fact, of the 432,000 residents of Leicester, 167,000 of those rent a house from either the council, housing association or private landlords, meaning 38.6% of Leicester people are actually tenants. Yet if you read the Daily Mail, you would think that the idea of home ownership is deeply embedded in the British soul. So now we have a paradox, homeowners or renters. The reason I suggest this, I noticed in the run-up to the election that housing was used at the general election as a way to get votes. This is nothing new, as all parties have always used housing to get votes, although previously it was about which party would build more council houses in the 1950s, through to council right to buy with Thatcher and everyone since. Running election campaigns promising everybody their own home in one way or another. Yet did you notice at this election something changed? The parties weren't talking so much about increasing home ownership, but more about protecting the tenant. It seems the link between home ownership as the main goal of the British life is starting to change as we are slowly turning to a more European way of living. Renting is here to stay in Leicester and incrementally growing year on year. You see, in Britain there is no property tax based on ownership, which many other Western countries have. Instead, council tax is paid by the occupier of the home, meaning the tenant, not necessarily the owner, pays that. Both parties wanted to end no-fault evictions, which is a good thing. Yet Labour went further and mentioned rent controls in their manifesto. As I've mentioned before in other articles on the Leicester property market, rents since 2008, even in central London, have not kept up with inflation, so again was another headline to grab votes and possibly even an election bribe. The fact is that the majority of new British households formed since the millennium can now expect to rent from a private landlord for life. Therefore, the parties focused on this important demographic. Yet even with the new mortgage relief tax rules for landlords and the 200 plus pieces of legislation that govern the private rented sector, buy-to-let is still a viable investment option for most investors within the Leicester area. There's never been a better time to purchase a buy-to-let property in Leicester, but buy wisely. Gone are the days where you could make a profit on anything with four walls and a roof. Most importantly, do your homework, take advice and consider your options. And if you'd like advice on a rental property that you're considering to buy, or where to look at buying that's going to give you a good yield, a good return on that investment over the years of ownership, feel free to reach out to me at theleicesterpropertyblog.com or give me a call on 079 17 899 495.